Yeah, thank you very much for inviting us to participate in this seminar. We do work in this field, and we try to provide as much information as we can around cyber liability risk. On the technical side, there's a whole range of involvements that we have, so I'd be happy to take a variety of different questions from different angles later on. That's no problem there. However, the key thing that I would like to point out, and disclaimer really, is that what we do provide in terms of this presentation, it's meant for this presentation, and it's our views of how we see things. It's not meant to be advice that you take on and act on. You do need to consider what you're doing, and it's quite important that you always seek very specialist advice before acting on any information. And especially around the insurance area, because we are not insurance experts, but we are experts in how insurance companies look at this type of risk, and we work with them, and it is quite complex, and what we're looking at here is at a very, very general level. Okay, with that said then, although we called this presentation around exposure, looking at exposures, hold on, let me just click to the next slide. No, it's not moving. Oh, here we go. That's good. Okay, so we get involved in cybersecurity from a variety of different perspectives. What I thought I'd include here and start with the presentation on is looking at some of the recent figures that have come out in the latest report, which isn't around statistics from all over the world or from America or from other parts of Europe. These are statistics that are available and came out yesterday. And it's a report that's been sponsored by the UK Department of Business, Innovation and Skills. They sponsored the report. The report was put together by PwC, the accountant and consultancy firm, and InfoSecurity. InfoSecurity is an exhibition that's taking place right now in London at Earl's Court. It's a 3-day event where there are lots of security vendors, there are security seminars, webinars, there's all sorts of information that's being passed on. If you're interested in this sort of thing, it's the main event of the year for security professionals, and this report was put together by those 3 bodies. My personal involvement in this report has been, for the last 5-6 years, I've been involved on the advisory group to make sure that the BIS has some assurance that either PwC or InfoSecurity are not skewing the figures or doing things that make it such that it benefits them as consultants and so on. So we act as independent auditors in some respects, but not quite. We look at the advice we can provide them to make this report actually useful for those people reading it. So these figures that I'm going to present here are not extensive. The report will be available for download, and the download link will be passed on to yourselves through Sutton Winson. So these figures are hot off the press, and I've only got about 4 slides that includes figures that came out yesterday. Launch of the report yesterday was made by David Willits, who's a cabinet minister. So he launched the report officially yesterday, and we did get some summary figures, although, as I said, the full report will be available, and we shall get you a link to that. Now, one of the sort of headlined figures that were presented and information that came out yesterday, two key things. One was that the percentage of respondents that had a breach had gone down compared to last year. Also, the average number of breaches went down as well. Now, that is very surprising, because it contradicts lots and lots of figures that are elsewhere. Equally, at the same time that those have gone down, those numbers have gone down, the cost of the worst breach of the year had doubled, and also the overall cost of security breaches doubled as well. So taking those figures and putting them side by side effectively, we've got 81% of large organisations that had a breach, which is down from 86, 60% of sort of small businesses down from 64, and 59% of respondents expects that there will be more security incidents last year than this year, even though that they've gone down this year for the moment. Now, in terms of the cost, the figures there, for large organisations, anything from 600,000 to 1.15 million. This is the cost of the worst security breach of last year, and it is up from 450,000 to 850,000 the year before. This is for large organisations. Small organisations, the figure is slightly different. Now, what the report does do very well is it does separate large organisations from small ones to give a fairly good comparison. So when and if you are interested, you can download the figures and get more information and details about these. A second lot of data I want to highlight from the report is that 55% of large businesses were attacked by an unauthorized outsider last year. Now compare that, so the two figures that you've got there in front of you, on the left are for large organizations, on the right are for small organizations. And if you go through the figures, so the first figure, it's gone down significantly for both of those. And then the second figure is on the infections from malware or malicious software, and that's actually gone up, and that's gone up for both large and small organizations than the past. The next figure is not quite the same. It's similar to last year. For large organisation, has gone down about 7% for small organisations. And that's a denial of service attacks, which has changed. The fourth figure down is the large organisations detecting outsiders that had successfully penetrated their network from last year. That's gone up a bit for large and small organisations. And the final figure has gone down for large organisations a little and gone up for small organisations. That's the figure of the outside, where large organisations, small organisations know that outsiders have actually stolen their intellectual property or confidential data in the last year. Now, both large and small organisations will be impacted in a completely different way, and it's difficult to apply the same rules, or even the same rules whether by size of organisation necessarily, because industry will play a big factor in that. And in terms of the different industries that we work with, we find that some industries are harder hit than others because of the fact that of the intellectual property and the data that they hold that makes them more of a target or less of a target. The third lot of data I wanted to highlight was around that 68% of large organisations provide ongoing security awareness training, and this has gone up from last year. Again, for small organisations, it's also gone up from 48 to 54. So that's fairly good in that organisations are now investing more in awareness training than they used to. And then 23% of respondents hadn't briefed their board on security risks in the last year, and 13% have never done so ever. That's quite surprising, because what we were seeing was the fact that it is going up, and although it's going up, it's also a surprising number of organisations that haven't actually briefed their board. So I'm sure that that's going to change over time. 27% of large organisations said their responsibilities for ensuring data is protected aren't very clear, compared to 24% who say that they are very, very clear. Again, I do believe that this will increase over a period of time. What we find is that organisations that have a breach end up being very clear after the breach, because they realise that they need to be clear, compared to those percentage of organisations that haven't had a breach. It's the major breach that makes them change the way that they work. The last figure on this slide, 70% of companies where security policy was poorly understood had staff-related breaches versus 41. And that figure illustrates the importance of training and awareness with staff, and the impact that has on the number of breaches that you're likely to get on the whole. The fourth slide and the final slide in terms of the statistics from this particular report compares large organisations had security 12% of large organisations had security breach in the last year, relating to social networks compared to 14%. We don't see that changing drastically until all organisations are using social networks in a similar way. At the moment, what the report has been shown is that the large organisations and the use of social network and the small organisations' use of social network are very different, and the policies that they have within those organisations are very different as well in terms of what staff are allowed to use and do, and what they're not allowed to use and allowed to do. 7% of large organisations have had a security breach in the last year involving smartphones or tablets. Last year it was 9%, so that hasn't changed at the moment. But again, given some of the statistics that we have had from other reports in the UK and around the world on the increase in malware on mobile devices, this is likely to go up, we believe. And also, if you look at the maturity with organisations about hacking mobile devices, what we see often is a trend that as hackers get more and more astute and hone in their skills over a period of time, they will start to attack different types of applications within devices. So the type of attacks we're going to see is going to change, and we believe that it's going to have an impact on the percentage of attacks as well. Next figure is 5% of respondents had a security breach in the last year relating to one of their cloud computing services, and that's compared to 4%, so that hasn't changed much at all. And the last item there, 10% of the worst security breaches were due to portable media bypassing defences, and this is up from 4%. So that's gone up quite a high percentage, really. Now, all these figures, I appreciate that some of these are a bit technical, but what they're trying to illustrate really is that there are some things that have changed and some things haven't changed, and it very much depends on the maturity of that particular area. And one of the first slides I showed you saying that the number of instances have gone down in the UK, and also the number of breaches per organisation has gone down slightly as well. We think this is a temporary glitch. It could be due to a whole number of reasons, but one of my own personal theories is the fact that over the last 2 years, we have been seeing what are called advanced evasion techniques that hackers are using, where they are getting through systems unnoticed. And also, statistics that we've seen out in the last 2 years is that it's taking longer to identify some of the more advanced attacks than have been picked up before. So whereas before it might have taken 100, 150 days to pick up advanced attacks, now it's taking 200, 250 days. So because it's taking longer to pick up the fact that you've been breached, it could be one of the influencing factors as to why the figure looks a bit lower this year and why the number is looking as if it's gone down, although most organisations anticipate that the breaches they've had is likely to be the same or be going up over the next few years. Okay, so with that complex set of stats, I apologise if it's too nerdy for some people, but I thought it might be useful to get a couple of slides on the stats behind it, especially since these are UK specific slides and UK specific stats, and they are sponsored by the Government Department of Business, Innovation and Skills. Okay, now what I've got now is a couple of slides looking at examples and case studies of different types of companies and the sort of exposures that they could possibly have, and they are very general because even organisations within a particular industry or within a particular type of business, there could be additional exposures as well.